You might remember my video from a couple of months ago where I took you through how I made a very historically inaccurate 12 gauge gown. Welcome back for the second part where we take a look at how I made the coat that goes with it. Patchwork inside and out, fully quilted. This took a million years. Please like and subscribe for more terrible ideas I totally overinvest in. This curtain fabric had been in my stash for some time, and I'd originally planned to make an 1830s style gown out of it. Having recently at the time, back in 2019, binge-watched Gentleman Jack, I determined it was in fact far too thick and heavy, but it's plenty sturdy enough to serve as a basis for a lot of patchwork. My other main materials, literally all of the fabric scraps I'd saved up that year, specifically for this project because we are good children and don't hoard fabric scraps just because, right? Plus some old clothes that weren't in good enough condition to donate. I wanted a very simple shape to keep the patchwork as easy as possible, so I measured out a half circle for the skirt, rectangles for the sleeves, and a very square back, 2 angled front pieces that will be a wrap at the neckline, and 2 underarm gussets. The technique I'm using is most commonly referred to as crazy quilting, even though it is technically patchwork, not quilting, and was extremely popular in the USA in the later Victorian era. There are fiddlier and more intricate ways of doing this, but the technique I use is to layer scraps, sew a line, then flip the scrap over and iron. I usually either start at one end and work down, or I start in the middle and work outwards in a spiral. Occasionally you get fabric with interesting edges that you can just top stitch, or gaps that you have to cover with a patch, but largely the stitching on this ends up invisible. This worked great for at least the sleeves and body pieces as these were quite small, but the skirt of this coat was enormous. I made some very large patches by sewing different scraps together, and then I laid them out on the skirt with roughly even gaps between them. I could then fill in those gaps with, you guessed it, even more scraps of fabric. I really enjoyed this part of the process, partially because chaos and bright colours and no fixed plan, yes, good, happy goblin brain, and partially because these are all scraps from projects I have made, so it was like a tour of garments and characters that I love. The lining was also patchwork, but of a very different style. The game I was making this for was all about plucky rebels versus the evil empire, and I had reasons to chuck in a bit of evil empire order and symmetry into my costume. Taking all the black and white scrap fabric, I'd made lots of strips. You can be careful and measure these, but they don't have to be a particular width for the effect to work, and a range of lengths is handy. If you're okay with trimming stuff down, you also don't have to be super precise about straight lines or worry about overshooting the end, as long as you get the order right. You sew 2 pieces together, short side butting against long side to make a triangle shape, and then you line up each strip's long side, alternating every time to get this cool zigzag pyramid thing. I did this for each sleeve, the back, the fronts, and also the massive skirt. At this point, order of operations gets fiddly, so outer fronts and back get sewn together at the shoulders, gussets onto outer sleeves onto outer body. Lining fronts to backs at shoulders, and while they're all still flat, sew around the neckline. Sleeve lining is sewn to sleeve outer at the cuff. Sew everyone's side seams up, making sure the gussets do their thing, and flip the whole thing inside out. There you have a finished cuff and neckline, and a lining that just needs connecting at the inside arm seams, where it will never be seen. At this point, I had some concerns about how cold the event was going to be, and I had some wool batting left over from making my gambeson, so I sandwiched that in before sewing up the inside seams. The skirt was lined in a similar way and turned out through the waist. That could then be sewn to the body outer layer all in one, with only the body lining free to be turned over and hand stitched to cover the seam. Then I ran out of time and the event happened, and under normal circumstances this is probably where this project would have been abandoned. Wearable, but not completely finished. But 2020 happened. So with nothing to make in the near future, I pulled this coat out again and started addressing the one major structural issue it had. I had added quilt batting to this coat, but it was not quilted. With nothing securing the batting in place, it was only a matter of time before it warped, bunched up, pulled out of shape, moved around, or otherwise made the coat awkward and uncomfortable to wear, which would mean unpicking seams to get back in and fix it. Or I could secure it in place now, before any of that happened. Quilt batting has a maximum recommended space between stitches, which for this 100% wool batting was 2 inches. I also knew I didn't want an all-over quilting pattern, so I made myself a template square of 2 inches by 2 inches, used that to give me a grid to work across, and started making individual stitches which were knotted on the inside. This took like 8 months. Like, I'm just going to make you sit here for a moment with the knowledge that this, which is nearly completely invisible from the outside, took 8 months. 8 months. Finally, I had some buckles laying around, so I cut some simple straps out of my leather stockpile and sewed them onto the outside of the coat with the same thread I used to do the quilting stitches. This is by far the most exciting part of the process, what with the rivets and hammering and all, but it was also done in under an hour. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, reveal footage. I made this for a game set in a very low technology fantasy world which had 4 gods, one of which was the god of art and creativity. The costume brief we were given focused more on themes and aesthetics, like the end of summer and the falling of autumn leaves, than specifics, which gave me a lot of room to play around in. Having decided to play a travelling tailor because there's only so much research I'm willing to do for a character I will play once, I had the idea of this coat, a basic shape that would broadly make sense to an early medieval sewist, a warm, comfortable garment to travel in, and a wearable piece of art, someone who works with extremely valuable materials but doesn't necessarily have a lot of wealth themselves, preserving fragments of precious cloth, a riot of colour celebrating the god of beauty and creation, or the overlapping shapes and colours of autumn and the falling leaves and the dying year. And the lining, mostly hidden from everyone around you, the monochromatic order of the invading empire, a hint that everything is not quite as it seems. I do get a lot of enjoyment out of more historical costuming, but fantasy gives me so many opportunities to play with new ideas. Having a character to design for and develop as I work on the costume is easily one of my favourite parts of LARPing outside of the event itself. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, do all the things that make the YouTube gods happy, follow me on Instagram, and if you feel so inclined, check out my Ko-fi page, where you can donate to support this channel. I'm currently working on a series of videos about costume for LARPing in the field, and a fun selection of silly costume videos for the housing season. Donate £10 or more to get a shout out on the channel in October. Dream big, and I'll see you next time.